Everybody, I'm April Cummings. This is Edbeat. I'm with Cayman Life TV, and joining me, of course, is Patrick Brendel from CaymanCurrent.org. Hi, Patrick.
Hi, April. How are you?
You still have the mysterious cup of tea just out of sight?
Yes, it's very
Patrick,
hot.
Patrick, he's drinking his hot tea to keep his voice and vocal cords warm, because we have so much to talk about today, right?
That's right.
I am ridiculously cheesy. Okay, so I feel like the kids aren't the only ones getting their report cards right now. A slew of school reports are coming out from the Office of Education Standards. And so it's kind of hard to know where to start with so many of them. You thought it would be a good idea this week for us to highlight the ones coming out of the BRAC. Let's talk a little bit about that one.
Yeah, we'll take a little staycation over to the bluff. And I guess Layman Scott High School isn't technically on the bluff, but
No, the shadow of the bluff is what I call it, so nicely protected. That's just me. Don't expect me to protect the weather and the storms. So, just before we get started there, I visited Layman E Scott, I'm going to say probably just before the COVID-19 lockdown. So about a year, I guess. And we were doing a classroom of the month. It was really focused on public speaking and presentation skills. And I got to tell you, Patrick, those kids were sharp. They were prepared. They were just highly focused on doing the best job they could possibly do. And they all the kids I met anyway, all the students I met, all took their academics extremely seriously. It looks like that kind of plays out in what the OES is seeing from the school.
yes, it definitely shows. And maybe I should have been the one to be inside that public speaking and presentation class. I think it could help with things like this.
They were better than I was, I'll tell you.
Yeah, but so Layman Scott, the school formerly known as Cayman Brac High School, has become the third public school to get a good rating. And so that's following on with John Gray, which we discussed last week, and also the Lighthouse School. And just like the Lighthouse School, Layman Scott got all goods across the board. So they got rated good in 18 out of 18 categories. So, it's a very solid performance. And as you alluded to, the reputation and the reality of the public education system on Cayman Brac is that the schools are perform better than the schools on Grand Cayman, the public schools. And I think it's an interesting case study on the Brac, like so many different topics, because Cayman Brac is a self-contained community relatively, and it has significant differences. And in this case, it's not just the community that's different from the Grand Cayman community, but according to the measurables, the schools are significantly different from the Grand Cayman schools.
Kind of a different profile, if you will. Look, the population of the BRAC is much smaller, right? So inherently, that's going to pose, I think, both some benefits and some challenges. But boy, in the case of Layman E Scott, it seems to pose more benefits than challenges, or they're rising to those challenges better in many respects. What are kind of the dynamics of that profile? What does it look like for someone who's not familiar with it?
Well, we can talk about student outcomes first. And kind of every year, as long as I've been here, and since 2015 is when they've been keeping statistics broken out by high school. But every year, Layman Scott students outperform the national average on year 11 exams by anywhere from 15 to 41 percentage points. And that's the measure of kids who are getting 5 or more level 2 passes. So just to put it in perspective, Layman Scott has around a 70% pass rate, and in Grand Cayman, that's around 40%.
So it's a significant difference. I mentioned the size of the population, which therefore should translate to size of classes as well. And I've been told by a number of educators that every time I spout off my philosophy that a smaller classroom size is better because I can get more attention, they say that doesn't always bear out. But if that's one of the criterion at Layman E Scott, I mean, the classes are smaller, and the teachers do have more time and attention to give them.
Yes, that's true. I think if you talk to educators and researchers, they say the benefits and drawbacks of what an ideal class size is mixed at best, but it seems to be working at Layman Scott. It's much smaller than either John Gray or Clifton Hunter, so it has 153 students. So compare that to 1,100 at John Gray, or I believe 850-ish at Clifton Hunter. So it's significantly smaller. And not only are there fewer students in the building, but the building is less crowded. And earlier this year, the Cayman Current did analysis of school crowding and capacity, basically comparing the number of students in the building to the maximum number of students that the building could hold. So Layman Scott is at less than 50% capacity, and John Gray and Clifton Hunter are among the most crowded schools, and they're at about 90% capacity. So there's less students with more space. And as you mentioned, class sizes at Layman Scott are around 13 kids, give or take. Mm-hmm. And that's about half of John Gray or Clifton Hunter. And I've been told anecdotally that some of the more specialized subjects like the sciences, you might have 4 or 5 kids to a teacher at Layman Scott. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like having a personal tutor.
And I do see some benefits on that. I mean, of course, that's with my attention span, of course. So we've talked about sort of that proportion of student body to the actual classroom size. We've talked about the sizes a bit. There was another factor related to that that I thought was interesting as well, that I think from my perspective had to do with the fact that on Grand Cayman, you have both private and public schools. But in Cayman Brac, really anyone who's living in the Brac, this is where their kids are going to go to school, unless they homeschool, I guess. But that's the only other option, really. I wonder if that plays a factor in that success.
Well, one of the things that people talk about, and that Peter Carpenter, the former chief school inspector, has talked about, is the differences in parental. When you're talking about Layman Scott, as you mentioned, the community is on the Brac is more homogeneous in a way, in terms of how many people share the same employer, which would be the Cayman Islands government. Right. And as you said, there's no private schools. So in theory, the Cayman Brac community would be heavily invested in the only school that's there for their kids to go to, which happens to be a public school. And when you talk about, on the flip side, which is a phenomenon where they talk about parents self-selecting their children out of the public school system, right, that's not an option on the Brac, unless, of course, you're homeschooling.
So I did see, and of course this is anecdotal, but I did see big turnout for the events that the students participated in or competed in. People, it is like a small town in many respects, so everybody knows everybody. And there is a heavy emphasis on performing well academically, which, yes, I see it, but perhaps it's more diluted on Grand Cayman in some respects at times. So it was interesting just how invested, not just the parents, grandparents, parents, teachers from different classes and the different students, just people from the community who showed up for things related to the students. And they really cheered them on at every step of the way. And I thought, well, it's like having your own cheerleading squad. You both feel the joy of having people pay attention to you, but also the pressure as well. So a little carrot and stick, I guess, in a way. I can see how that would help motivate and encourage.
Yes, and I think there may be something to small towns where there's not as many distractions for the adults and the kids, other than what's going on in the schools. And where I come from originally in Texas, they have this thing called Friday Night Lights, which is high school football games. And not only do the students turn out, and not only the parents, but the entire town will come out to these stadiums. So in my hometown of 60,000 people, easily 15,000 people out to a high school football game every Friday, with a lot of community pride and people from the other town following their team to to root for their team too. So there could be this kind of dynamic going on the Brac as well.
Any other insights, kind of? I know you're sort of here. So, if you don't know, Patrick's kind of a data-driven dude, right? He likes to analyze and look at the numbers and kind of see what things we might take from them. But are there any other insights based on kind of what you've been looking at at Layman E. Scott?
Well, there's this whole feel good aspect of it that that I think we've been talking about for the past few seconds. Uh, so, I mean, historically, the Brac's taken great pride in its education system. And the name of the school, Layman Scott, is, of course, named after Teacher Scott, who's the father of Dan Scott, who's the chairman of the Education Council. And the education minister is Juliana O'Connor Connolly, representative of Cayman Brac. So these Brackers and Brac families, obviously, at the highest levels, this is the education that they're caring about. But in terms of data, when you get down to dollars and cents,
Mm.
and we've done analysis on this, the per student cost of attending school. The three most expensive, where they spend the most per student. So the three most expensive public schools are Cayman Brac schools. Well, technically, the first most expensive is Little Cayman Education Services, because they have like two kids. But the two primary schools on the Brac, and then Layman Scott, were the government spends the most per student. So for that, the government spends $19,000 a year per student at Layman Scott, compared to $11,000 at John Gray and $13,000 at Clifton Hunter. So it's not quite double, but it's significantly more. So I think when you look at the big picture on Cayman Brac, I think I called it a perfect storm, but in a good way. Um, the community is smaller, the high school is smaller, the class sizes are smaller, the facility is less crowded, and the government is spending more money per student. And you combine that with the community rallying behind you and this expectation and tradition of excellence in education, and what you're getting is these superior outcomes to the national average.
It is kind of an interesting case study, like you said in the beginning. What else is going on from Cayman Current this week? What can we expect?
Well, it's not this week, but last week I wanted to highlight this so
I
that you
can't,
can get
you know,
to.
you know, I have problems with space and time, right? So I'm never sure if I'm looking ahead or behind, but
Yeah.
I'm somewhere in there.
Well, the good thing about the web is it's fast, but it also is slow and has a memory. So, still
Yes,
living on my
indeed.
website is an interview I did with Martin Nugent, who's the new principal at St. Ignatius Catholic School, which had some public issues last year with parental concerns about school leadership, and which ultimately resulted in the school getting dinged by the Office of Education Standards, with leadership being rated weak, and the school receiving a satisfactory rating, even though there was good or excellent teaching and learning and student outcomes. So Principal Nugent arrived on island in mid-March and has been furiously at work wrapping up the school year, but also planning ahead. And he's coming to Cayman. He's originally from the UK, but he's built schools and done stints in Malaysia, Dubai, and Tunisia, which he calls Tunisia, which is probably the correct way to say it. And I guess one interesting thing for anybody who drives by is St. Ignatius has a $5 million sports hall complex, which will also have classrooms and stuff. It'll be a really nice big building on Walker's Road, and they're going to start putting the heavy equipment and the concrete trucks and such out at the end of June. And they're just waiting for students to wrap up their exams before they start making a lot of noise.
Yeah, I've had my first experience in many years with exam season, and I do have to say, Like if there's too loud a truck outside, I'm afraid the knowledge will escape my child's head. That's just how it is. How it is. But it is a high pressure time for kids. But and I should mention, I guess, because it's also a time of celebration. There's some parents like me who are actually seeing a child graduate, and it's so much fun. I mean, it's so emotional. But to see this day when they're sort of walking down the aisle, it's really nice. I feel like all that yelling about the homework is finally, well, I still have one more child, but it's just lovely to see it pay off like that. It was incredible.
Yeah, congratulations, by the way. I should have started off the segment by saying that.
Listen, some of us are socially awkward, Patrick, and I don't mean you. So just, I insert myself in whenever it's convenient. So that said, we are going to still be taking a look, I think, in the coming days over some of the other OES reports that are getting published. And as a parent with kids in different schools, I am starting to sort of, see some of the preliminary responses to those things. Having seen St. Ignatius make, big choices related to its OES report, I will be curious, as I always am, to see what impact the outcomes of these reports will have, because they come at a time that gives kind of a summer for the school leadership and the parents and teachers to kind of, chew through the responses and see kind of what they're going to do next. Because the idea is these are an ongoing process, right? You don't arrive at the destination. You're supposed to continually work on improving based on the feedback and kind of your score at the end of the day. So I think once we see all the reports, it will be interesting to kind of see that as a benchmark for what happens next, which is what Cayman Current's really been doing, is monitoring that progress.
Yeah, and I think it's important to talk about. I think for one way I like to put it is when you talk about education for a nation, a school, or a child, it's always aspirational. So
Mm.
you're always trying to do better and learn more efficiently and learn the right things and learn how to apply them. So you're never going to, even schools we talked about last week, schools that got excellence all across the board, they still had recommendations, whether it was something as simple as keep the gate locked. So there's always something to work on. So I think these reports are constructive and positive in that way, because it's not just saying this is a bad school and you're never going to be any better. It's, well, there's lots of things. Here's the things you do well. Here's things you need to work on, and here's how you get here. One school that's on an upward trajectory, for example, is Clifton Hunter. And
Mm.
Clifton Hunter just received a satisfactory rating, um, which is not the good rating that John Gray or Layman Scott got, but it's up from the lowest weak
Yeah.
rating that they got just a few years ago. And Clifton Hunter, the inspectors referenced inspirational leadership from the principal, Richard Wildman, who's been there since 2019. And so, inspirational leadership, I wish somebody would say that about me someday. Uh, so what they're
They don't
talking
say
about
that
is
about me, Patrick. They don't say that about me either.
so what they're talking about is that they're painting a picture of a school that's on its way up,
Hmm.
which is what you can hope for. And an interesting thing from that report, which has become a theme at that school, is, and I'll just read this quote. So at Clifton Hunter, teachers and students did their best to make often less than ideal teaching areas operate effectively. So
Mm.
what they're saying is the facilities haven't been built right, and they're referring to a lot to the open classroom environments and
Right.
noise. And just remember, this school opened in 2012, and it cost 110 million dollars to build.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, of course, my takeaway is no matter what you're given, the fact that there are those who, instead of sitting around and just, moping about it, really, on the other hand, are trying to make the best of the cards they've been dealt and keep pushing forward anyway. And I have to say, for me, that's a great takeaway, because it's very easy to get kind of caught up in the, oh my gosh, this isn't what we thought it was going to be, or it isn't working the way we wanted it to. Woe is us. Good leadership has a lot to, because in real life, that's what kids and teachers and real people, this is what you deal with in life, right? So more power to them for it. All right. On that note, wait, I'm supposed to be timing us, people, and I'm so bad at it. Let's see. 21 minutes. We were supposed to talk for 5 minutes, right? It didn't work out. All right,
Back to
everybody.
school.
Thanks. Back to school. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. I'm April Cummings with Cayman Life TV. Of course, send me ideas, comments, etc. to april@caymanlife.ky. I give a different email every week, but they're both mine. And then, Patrick, you know the drill. Your email is?
pbrendel@caymancurrent.org.
Easy.
Or you can WhatsApp me at 326-5064.
And now the spam begins for Patrick. It's a good day. Don't forget to check out caymancurrent.org. He is on top of issues related to education. There are many issues we could talk about, but I think it's great that we're kind of focusing right now on sort of school performance. We'll drill down on other subjects as time goes on. And thanks so much for watching. We're going to be back again next week with lots more exciting Edbeat, right?
That's right. Thanks, April. And thanks,
So
everybody, for
awkward.
watching.